From its origins in ancient alchemy to the role it plays in modern life, alcohol carries a secret story that few truly understand. The word itself, alcohol, has roots that stretch far beyond the bottle on your shelf. It is a term born from mysticism, spiritual alchemy, and transformation. But this story holds a paradox. Alcohol is both a refined essence and a veil that clouds deeper truths. The Arabic word al-kuhul originally described a delicate powdered substance, one used to purify the eyes, not just physically but symbolically. This essence was believed to sharpen vision, allowing one to see beyond the surface of everyday life, to glimpse the hidden realities beyond ordinary perception. Over time, as alchemy developed, al-kuhul came to mean the purified spirit extracted through distillation, a substance distilled from base materials into something more potent and refined. This process, both literal and metaphorical, reflects the spiritual journey many seekers embark on to refine their souls from the heavy, crude material world into clarity and light. Yet the very essence of alcohol contains a riddle. Though born from a process of purification, its consumption often leads not to clarity, but to confusion and separation. Rather than uplifting the spirit, it can tether the soul to lower vibrations, clouding the inner light that guides us toward divine connection. This is the paradox of alcohol, a refined substance that frequently obscures the very truth it symbolizes. The ancient alchemists sought transformation on multiple levels. Just as they distilled matter to extract its essence, the spiritual seeker strives to purify the soul through disciplines that dissolve illusions and attachments. But when the essence distilled from nature is misused, taken as an escape rather than a sacred tool, it becomes a shadow of true transformation, a counterfeit that mimics transcendence while deepening disconnection. To understand this fully, we must look beyond the physical effects of alcohol and explore its spiritual symbolism and consequences. Alcohol affects the body, mind, and subtle energies in ways that ancient spiritual traditions warned about. It lowers the vibrational frequency of the body and mind, making it harder for the soul to resonate with higher realms of consciousness. The altered states it induces create a false sense of liberation, a temporary escape that dulls the senses rather than awakening them. The pineal gland, often called the third eye in mystical traditions, is considered the gateway to spiritual insight and intuitive perception. Regular consumption of alcohol dulls this sensitivity, severing the individual from their inner guidance and divine connection. The faculties spiritual practices seek to cultivate, awareness, presence, clarity, are the very abilities that alcohol impairs. Over time, this loss of spiritual sensitivity leads to stagnation and confusion, leaving the soul trapped in cycles of illusion and craving. This cyclical nature of intoxication mirrors the spiritual concept of samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, characterized by suffering and attachment. Alcohol epitomizes samsara, fleeting pleasure followed by a crash, craving repeated indulgence despite the absence of lasting fulfillment. It symbolizes humanity's unconscious attempt to satiate a deeper longing, the soul's yearning for transcendence, through external substances that cannot truly satisfy. The desire for intoxication reflects a distorted echo of the soul's innate longing to reunite with the divine source. Yet, because alcohol is a material substance, it only offers a counterfeit experience, deepening separation instead of fostering unity. This false relief can become addictive, substituting for the inner work necessary to achieve genuine spiritual liberation. True spiritual awakening requires turning inward, redirecting this yearning toward practices that cultivate lasting bliss and divine union. Meditation, Chanting, prayer and self-discipline open the doors to the divine intoxication. Mystics describe a profound joy and ecstasy not dependent on physical substances, but born from surrender and connection. The paradox of alcohol, therefore, is clear. While its alchemical origins tie it to refinement and transformation, its misuse anchors the soul in illusion and bondage. The teachings of spiritual masters across traditions emphasize awareness, clarity and inner connection as the keys to liberation, qualities dulled by alcohol's influence. To move beyond this cycle, the seeker must recognize the soul's true longing and consciously pursue practices that honor and awaken the divine essence within. This realization marks the beginning of a transformative journey, one from unconscious craving toward conscious spiritual freedom. To truly grasp the spiritual implications of alcohol, we turn to the wisdom of ancient mystics who understood this paradox deeply. The great Sufi poet Rumi, whose words have inspired seekers for centuries, frequently used the metaphor of intoxication, not the physical kind, but a divine ecstasy born from union with the beloved. In Rumi's poetry, wine is not a drink, but the love of the divine itself, a sacred elixir that intoxicates the soul with joy, wisdom, and freedom. Rumi warned against mistaking physical wine for this higher intoxication. While the material drink offers only a fleeting escape, it clouds the clarity needed to perceive higher truths. The soul, in its longing for oneness, can be deceived by these shadows, leading it further away from the light. True intoxication, according to Rumi, arises not from substances but from surrender, the complete letting go into the embrace of the divine. This surrender dissolves the ego and worldly attachments, freeing the soul to experience boundless love and unity. Similarly, the spiritual teacher Osho emphasized the importance of awareness and presence as the foundation of transformation. He described alcohol as an anesthetic, a tool that dulls the senses and distances individuals from the reality of their existence. To Osho, true freedom comes from embracing life fully, with all its discomforts and challenges, without numbing the pain or hiding from the truth. Alcohol, by blurring awareness, becomes a barrier to this deep, raw presence. Osho's teaching invites us to confront the discomfort of growth directly. In doing so, the mind expands beyond its conditioned limitations, and spiritual awakening can unfold. Any substance that clouds the mind, he argued, undermines this process, preventing the seeker from evolving into their fullest potential. Another towering figure in spiritual history, Paramahansa Yogananda, the revered yogi and author of Autobiography of a Yogi, also cautioned against the use of intoxicants. For Yogananda, self-discipline and mental clarity were vital for meditation and divine communion. He described the restless mind as a turbulent pond stirred by the wind. Alcohol, he explained, only intensifies this restlessness, making it harder to still the mind and access the deep states of inner silence necessary for spiritual progress. Yogananda taught that intoxicants disrupt the harmony of body and mind, veiling the inner light that guides the soul toward liberation. To walk the path of enlightenment requires mastery over the senses and a strengthened will, qualities weakened by alcohol's influence. The mind, clouded by intoxication, loses its sharpness and direction, drifting further from the center of spiritual truth. These teachings are echoed in many ancient spiritual traditions that warn against alcohol's spiritual hazards. In Buddhism, abstaining from intoxicants is one of the foundational ethical precepts, emphasizing the importance of clarity, ethical living, and mindful awareness. Hindu scriptures also caution against alcohol, linking it to loss of self-control and moral decline. In Sufism, wine holds a complex role. It is simultaneously a metaphor for divine love and ecstasy, and a substance that physically distracts and pulls the seeker away from God. The mystic Jalaluddin Rumi often employed the imagery of wine to express the overwhelming love and unity with the divine, but always distinguished this from the deceptive effects of physical intoxication. Gnostic Christianity similarly uses the symbol of wine to represent attachment to material pleasures versus spiritual knowledge. While wine at the Eucharist signifies the blood of Christ and eternal life, excessive drinking is condemned as a mocker that leads one away from wisdom and spiritual purpose. This dual symbolism of alcohol as both divine communion and worldly distraction is central to understanding its place in human consciousness. It reminds us that substances themselves are not inherently evil, but their context and intention shape their spiritual impact. Alchemy and mystical traditions often refer to a spiritual wine, a metaphorical elixir representing divine grace and awakening. This is the true substance that intoxicates the soul, filling it with joy, insight, and unity. Mistaking physical wine for this sacred elixir leads to confusion and suffering. Physical intoxication dulls awareness and numbs the spirit, while spiritual intoxication heightens consciousness and opens the heart. The latter is not achieved through external means, but through devotion, meditation, selfless service, and surrender. Mystics from all traditions guide seekers toward this spiritual intoxication, offering practices that dissolve the ego and reveal the divine presence within. Meditation quiets the mind and allows the soul to rest in the divine embrace. Chanting and prayer cultivate devotion and connection. Acts of love and compassion open the heart to divine grace. The Persian poet Hafez captures this beautifully when he writes, "I am a hole in a flute that the Christ breath moves through." In this image, the soul becomes a vessel through which divine grace flows freely, transforming the seeker into an instrument of love and light. As we begin to lift the veil cast by illusion and false substitutes, the path to reclaiming our divine connection becomes clear. Recognizing the counterfeit nature of physical intoxication is the first step toward awakening to the true eternal intoxication of the spirit. The moment we recognize the limitations and dangers of physical intoxication, a new awareness begins to emerge, one that invites us to reclaim our inner clarity and spiritual power. This awakening is not about denial or restriction alone. It is about understanding the deeper reasons behind our cravings and redirecting them toward what truly satisfies the soul. At its core, the desire for intoxication reflects a universal longing, the soul's yearning to reconnect with the source of all life, to experience unity, bliss, and freedom from suffering. Yet, because this yearning is often unconscious, it can manifest as a search for external substances or distractions that promise relief, but ultimately leave us more empty and disconnected. The journey toward true spiritual liberation involves turning this unconscious desire inward, learning to access the profound joy and peace that already dwell within us. This inward turning requires discipline, courage, and a willingness to face the raw realities of our own minds and hearts without numbing or avoidance. Meditation is one of the most powerful tools on this path. By sitting quietly with ourselves, observing our thoughts and feelings without judgment, we begin to dismantle the patterns that keep us trapped in cycles of craving and avoidance. Through meditation, the veil of illusion gradually lifts, revealing the radiant light of our true nature. Devotional practices such as chanting, prayer, or singing open the heart and foster a sense of connection to something greater than ourselves. They invite the soul to experience the divine directly, cultivating an ecstatic joy that transcends the temporary highs of physical substances. Selfless service is another transformative practice. When we reach beyond ourselves to help others without expectation of reward, we dissolve the ego's grip and open to the flow of divine grace. Acts of love and compassion become gateways to spiritual intoxication, filling the soul with lasting fulfillment. These practices do not promise instant gratification, but invite a gradual, steady unfolding of spiritual depth and freedom. The cravings for external escape lose their power as we discover that the bliss we seek has been inside us all along, waiting to be awakened. The transformation from addiction to liberation is not merely physical but profoundly psychological and spiritual. It calls for patience and self-compassion, recognizing that change unfolds in its own time. Yet with each moment of presence, clarity and surrender, we move closer to the true essence of our being. This path is not without challenges. The pull of samsara, the cycle of craving and suffering, is strong, and the illusions offered by the material world can be seductive. But the teachings of the spiritual masters remind us that beyond these illusions lies a boundless realm of peace, love and unity. By embracing the inner journey and cultivating practices that nourish the soul, we break free from the chains of false intoxication. We step into a life where joy is not fleeting or dependent on external substances but flows naturally from the heart's connection to the divine. This is the true meaning behind the evolution of alcohol's name from Al-kuhul, the purified essence, to spirit, the very breath of life and consciousness within us. When honored and understood, this spirit leads us home. When misused, it clouds our vision and deepens separation. As we continue on this exploration, we will look more closely at practical steps and spiritual insights to support this awakening. The path to liberation is open to all who seek it with sincerity and dedication. As we walk this path of spiritual awakening, it's important to understand the practical ways in which alcohol affects not only our spirit, but also our body and mind, because the three are deeply interconnected. Our physical vessel is the home for the soul, and when that vessel is clouded or harmed, our capacity for spiritual connection diminishes. Alcohol acts as a depressant on the central nervous system, slowing down brain function and dulling mental clarity. This physical dulling reflects the spiritual dulling discussed by ancient traditions. The very faculties that allow us to perceive subtle energies, experience intuitive insights, and maintain presence are weakened under the influence of alcohol. The pineal gland, often called the third eye, plays a crucial role here. Mystics and yogis have long recognized the pineal as a gateway to higher states of consciousness. It is sensitive to light and is believed to produce melatonin and other neurochemicals that influence our spiritual awareness. Alcohol consumption disrupts its function, making it harder to access meditative states or spiritual visions. Over time, regular drinking can dull this center, closing off the inner pathways to divine insight. The veil thickens and the soul's voice becomes faint, drowned out by the noise of intoxication and craving. This effect is not only biochemical but symbolic, a representation of the spiritual consequences that arise when we seek escape rather than engagement with our inner world. The very substances meant to refine and elevate are often twisted into instruments of bondage. The cycle of intoxication feeds into itself. Temporary relief leads to craving, which leads to more drinking, creating a feedback loop that pulls the individual deeper into samsara, the cycle of suffering and rebirth. But the good news is that this cycle can be broken. Awareness is the first step, recognizing the patterns and the true cost of intoxication. Once we become aware, we can begin to choose differently, cultivating habits and practices that restore clarity, presence and connection. Detoxifying the body becomes a sacred act, a commitment to honor the temple of the soul. This physical cleansing supports the mental and spiritual renewal necessary for transformation. Many spiritual traditions recommend abstinence from intoxicants as a foundation for progress. This abstinence is not about judgment or fear, but about creating space for the soul's voice to be heard clearly. In this space, meditation deepens, prayers become more heartfelt, and the sense of divine presence grows stronger. The seeker begins to experience moments of true intoxication, the blissful ecstasy of union with the divine that far surpass any temporary physical high. This awakening intoxication fills the heart with peace, love, and joy, dissolving fears and illusions. It is a natural state of being accessible to all who cultivate stillness, devotion, and surrender. The journey from physical intoxication to spiritual intoxication is one of profound transformation. It calls us to reclaim our power, restore our clarity, and embrace the fullness of life with open hearts. As we continue, we will explore how the teachings of spiritual masters offer practical guidance and inspiration for those seeking to walk this path, to lift the veil, awaken the inner light, and live in true freedom. Across centuries and cultures, spiritual masters have consistently pointed toward the same truth: liberation arises from within. The journey from illusion to awakening is deeply personal but universally accessible. It calls for sincerity, patience, and a willingness to face the self honestly. The path beyond intoxication, both physical and mental, leads to the rediscovery of the soul's innate brilliance. This brilliance is the spirit within, the essence from which the word Al-kuhul originally emerged, representing purification and refinement. When we honor this essence, we open ourselves to the transformative power of divine grace. The false intoxications that once clouded our vision fade away, replaced by clarity that shines like a beacon in the darkness. The sacred texts, mystical poetry, and teachings of enlightened beings serve as guiding lights on this journey. From Rumi's ecstatic verses to Yogananda's call for self-discipline, from Osho's emphasis on awareness to the ancient precepts of Buddhism and Hinduism, they all invite us to awaken from the trance of illusion and reclaim our true nature. This awakening is not a destination but an unfolding process, a continual refining of the soul's essence. It is a return to wholeness, a reunion with the divine spirit that animates all life. Choosing this path means embracing challenges and discomforts with courage, knowing they are part of the alchemical process that transforms base metal into gold. It means turning away from temporary escapes and turning inward toward lasting joy. It means living with presence, gratitude, and love, cultivating practices that nurture the soul's deepest longings. The name alcohol itself reminds us of this profound paradox and opportunity, a refined spirit that can either veil or reveal the divine depending on how it is understood and honored. As you reflect on this journey, consider the ways you can nurture your own spiritual clarity and connection. What practices invite you to slow down, breathe deeply, and listen to the still, small voice within? How can you transform the cravings for escape into invitations for awakening? The answers lie within, waiting to be discovered with each mindful step forward. This is the sacred evolution from seeking external intoxication to embodying the true spirit of divine intoxication. May your path be illuminated with wisdom, strength, and grace.